What's going on, everyone? TM24 here, and we are back with some more Marvel Snap content. If you are just now finding the channel, welcome. You are in a good spot. We're going to be talking about decks that I use to hit infinite. If you are a returning viewer, welcome back. I do appreciate your support. My llama here, even though he's not sitting behind me, he appreciates your support as well. And like I said, in today's video, we're going to be talking about the four decks that I used to hit infinite this season, actually just like a couple days ago. So, for the first part of my climb, this is the deck that I used, a Sauron, Kitty Pryde, Shuri deck. Now, if you guys have been keeping up with the content, you'll recognize all these decks. These are all the ones that I've made my most recent videos on. But I wanted to kind of show you that these decks that I'm showing you, I'm not just showing you to get content out there. I'm actually using these decks and getting results. So this one here, Shuri, Kitty Pryde, and Sauron. You can kind of see here, we've got Sauron and we've got a good base of his cards. We've got Ebony Maw, we've got Lizard, we've got Typhoid Mary, and we've got Red Skull. Sauron hitting any of those is going to feel great. Now what we included in this deck was Kitty Pryde. And because we included Kitty Pryde, it felt natural to include Angela so that we could start getting Angela buffed up. Other inclusions that we haven't talked about already. Zero, he just makes sense in this deck. There's a ton of cards that we're looking to get rid of their effects, so Zero is a must include in this deck. Additionally, I love Jeff. I love his ability to reach those locations we otherwise wouldn't be able to. I say that in pretty much every video, but I think it's huge. I think if you're playing a deck that can't, that you're really at a huge disadvantage. Now, the other two cards that we haven't talked about at all yet. Rogue. I like Rogue in this deck, particularly because she could take those ongoing abilities. Things like Null, things like Darkhawk, Devil Dino. Now, I will say, I didn't seem to get a ton of value out of her when playing her, but ultimately it didn't matter. So I would say you can consider Rogue a flex spot here, and maybe swap her out with something else. And the other card in here we included is Taskmaster. And it just kind of makes sense, right? We've got Shuri, we got Red Skull, Shuri into Red Skull into Taskmaster. It's, it was that old Shuri deck without being that Shuri deck. Additionally, I love going simply Kitty Pryde on 1, Kitty Pryde on 2, Kitty Pryde all the way up, even on turn 5. But you play Shuri and then Kitty Pryde, so your Kitty Pryde is going to be absolutely massive, meaning your turn 6 play could be Kitty Pryde right into Taskmaster for a surprising but a really cool and satisfying win. You could theoretically win a game with just Kitty Pryde, Shuri, and Taskmaster. But once you start reaching turn 3, you could play Kitty Pryde with Angela on 3. On 4, you can go Kitty Pryde plus Sauron. On 5, Shuri plus Kitty Pryde. And maybe you don't have Taskmaster, but you've got Red Skull. All of a sudden, it's Kitty Pryde and Red Skull. So I really, really like this deck. I think it's super consistent. Additionally, I do think this deck is going to be very, very solid in Conquest. And the reason that is because of the consistency that this deck has. You can really get your Angela buffed up. You're zeroing out some of these, these powerful cards. So you're not having to take on those negative effects, but you're getting the power. So I do think this one will be pretty solid in Conquest as well, but I use this one to climb from roughly 73 to 85-ish, and it had a lot of success. I would have continued to use it, but I wanted to try some other decks out, and let's go to that next one that I tried out, and it's a High Evolutionary LockJaw deck. Now, this is the one that I started with. As you can see, we've got the High Evolutionary package in there. We've got High Evolutionary, we've got Wasp, we've got Cyclops, Thing, and Hulk. I do think those are the best of the High Evolutionary cards, so I think it's a perfect inclusion, a perfect base to kind of build off of. Now, again, we got LockJaw, so we're trying to send Wasp through. We're trying to send Mjolnir through. I will say sometimes it felt like we weren't able to, I don't know what the best way to put this is. We're relying on LockJaw to come out so that we can send Wasp through and send Thor through. If we don't have those to send through, a lot of these cards don't feel great sending through. We'd rather keep Cyclops because of his effect thanks to High Evolutionary. Sending Jubilee feels fine, but she's also pulling from your deck, so you're getting less pulls out of LockJaw. You don't really want to send something like the Thing because 6 power plus the -3 that he's giving to your opponent feels good. So if you're not hitting your Wasp and your Mjolnir, it can feel a little bit tough to actually, send some of these through and make use of LockJaw. The other cards in this deck, obviously we talked about Thor. He's a natural inclusion because he can get powered up really quickly thanks to Mjolnir. We also have Jane Foster Thor, so that we can pull our Wasp and Mjolnir. We talked about Jubilee a little bit, but because our deck is so heavy, she is a natural inclusion. I think Dr. Doom is one of the better 6-drops in the game right now, being able to spread 5 power out, and potentially multiple times thanks to Odin. You can also get additional value from Odin thanks to things like the Thing or Jubilee, proccing those on reveal effects multiple times. Even Wasp, proccing hers again feels pretty good. Chavez, I like in this deck because of the consistency, the draw that she allows us to have. She's going to allow us to hopefully hit these power cards a little bit more often than not. And then, of course, we know about the Hulk. He can get powered up when we aren't, when we aren't playing cards, which unfortunately can happen a lot of times. I do like Cyclops in this list because I like having a turn 3 play, and having 3 cards in our deck that we could play on 3, it feels like we have a pretty good shot at playing them. I will say a lot of the times with this deck, you feel like you're way behind. So I did make changes. I wanted to go for something a little more high power, but still try and get some of that effect. So what I took out, I did end up taking Cyclops out, but I replaced him with another High Evolutionary card in Shocker. Potentially, we could get a discount on one of these 6-drops. Ideally, Dr. Doom would be great, so we could proc him again with Odin. But that wasn't the only card I replaced. I also ended up getting rid of Chavez, and we replaced Chavez with the Infinite. I think that was a pretty solid inclusion, but a lot of times the Infinite got stuck in my hand. So then I'm looking for ways to replace the Infinite. And when you're doing that, one card comes to mind, and that's going to be Dracula. Now, I've seen Dracula used in this list. He's got a lot of cards that he could hit. I only tried him for a couple games because he didn't feel that strong. Ultimately, the list that I used to actually climb from about 85 to 93, I would say. Once I hit 93, 94, I moved on to the next decks we're going to talk about. But the list that I used to get to there was this one right here. I do really, really like this list. It feels consistent, which I love consistency in my decks because I don't want to feel like I am... if I can find Cyclops, I don't want to feel like I'm, kind of piecing each game together. I want them to be able to flow, even if it's not the exact same play line. So even if it's not, LockJaw Wasp on 3, I don't mind going, Cyclops on 3, 4 being the Thing, 5 being, maybe a Jubilee or a Thor or something like that. It feels better. It feels like the deck flows better. With this list. Chavez providing the consistent draw. We do have power in the form of the Hulk. We've got Dr. Doom being able to spread power to potentially lanes that are locked. But this is the one I used to climb from about 85 to 93, maybe 94, before I finally moved on to Galactus. And this is the deck I initially started with, but we're not going to talk about that one because the one that actually got me to Infinite is this list right here. Now, I just put out a video on this deck specifically, and I did have a lot of success with this deck. I will say it's very tough to pilot because you've kind of got to piece your wins together. You've got to use the locations. You have to you have to kind of fool your opponent. And I think that this deck does a good job at doing that. I will link all these other videos in there as well if you want to go back and look at actual gameplay of these decks. But I like this list for a couple of reasons. It gives us multiple ways to win, right? On one of our lines of play is on 4, we get Iron Fist down. Ideally, we're using then Spider-Man to lock our opponent out of a location that they don't have a ton of power. And then we can Galactus on 6. Another line of play was simply going Green Goblin on 3, Hobgoblin into the same lane on 5, and then on 6 playing Galactus again. So you've got that line of play. Additionally, we've got Wave on 3, Galactus on 4, Spider-Man on 5 to lock him out, meaning we go into turn 6 with the chance to win the game ourselves. So we have a few different ways, but this one relies a lot more heavily on getting Galactus down, taking advantage of that huge ability that he brings. And, 7 is a decent amount of power. While it's not enough to, outright win you a lane on turn 6, this deck kind of uses Galactus more as I'd say more as a surprise. It's a lot more telegraphed if you go Wave on 3, but if you wait, Galactus is typically coming down on 6, which a lot of the times your opponent isn't looking or isn't planning for. So you can get some really strong wins that way. Now, some other cards in this list. Nebula, ideally we're taking resources away from our opponent. They're playing on that Nebula lane instead of playing on a different lane. That hopefully keeps a lane clear that we can lock them out of and then play Galactus. Additionally, Daredevil is great. He's going to give us some info. Maybe we don't have a clear Galactus to get down, but we can either lock them out or put them so far behind in a lane on turn 5 that we're going to win one lane and all we got to do is get another one. I like Luke Cage in this list just because I was running into so many High Evolutionary decks that it was potentially becoming a problem. He solves that problem. I already talked about Jeff and how I really like his ability. I think he's super strong. Again, Jeff can be used as kind of a diversion in this deck. If you play Jeff into a lane and he's the only card in that lane, maybe there's a Green Goblin on their side or something like that. As far as your opponent thinks, you're not playing Galactus there because Jeff is there, but Jeff can move. So you still have that option. A lot of the times, your opponent won't be thinking you're going to do that because it's easy to overlook. So easy to clear out that lane and allow Galactus to come through. Green Goblin and Hobgoblin, we talked about that line of play to set up our Galactus. I liked including Shang-Chi in this list as well because he gives us another win condition. I won multiple games just by playing Shang-Chi and Jeff, or Shang-Chi and Luke Cage on turn 6 because we knew where they were going to play and they had to go big, otherwise they were going to lose. So I really like Shang-Chi in this list, in this inclusion. Additionally, he's great if you do get Galactus down, but they end up playing something big. You now have an answer. So I love that. Chavez, again, consistent draw. That's the reason I included her. Additionally, she's like an emergency 9 power. So I like her. I think that what she brings in terms of the draw is more valuable than her actual power. But overall, I think she's very, I think she's kind of crucial because she allows you to draw those cards you need to draw. So these have been the 4 decks that I use to hit Infinite. Again, we've got Shuri, Kitty Pryde, Sauron with a Sauron base, using Shuri to potentially buff up Kitty Pryde, or going Shuri simply into something like a Typhoid Mary Taskmaster, or Typhoid Mary Red Skull Taskmaster. We have options with this deck. This is my favorite of the 3 right now. Then the second part of our climb, we did use the High Evolutionary LockJaw list. This was our most consistent and successful list, trying to get as many procs out of LockJaw as possible, sending the Wasp through, sending Mjolnir through, and then kind of spreading our power with Dr. Doom hopefully being pulled, and Odin being able to come down on top of things like Dr. Doom, like the Thing, like Jubilee, to get as much power out there as possible. And then finally, we finished up and hit Infinite with this Galactus deck, and I just went into depth about it. But what we're trying to do is get Galactus down. We have multiple ways to do it, multiple different lines of play that can still lead you to, you know, the outcome you're looking for, which of course is a victory. So these have been the 3 deck lists that I use to hit infinite this season. I hope you enjoyed them. If you've got these cards, definitely give them a shot. Like I said, my favorite of the 3 right now is this Shuri, Kitty Pryde, Sauron list. It just feels super consistent. It feels really, really strong, and you can get ahead. So this is my favorite one, but I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you've hung around till now would be a really good time to go ahead and hit that subscribe and like button. But until next time, have some fun.